So what we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to be starting on the profiles. So what I'm doing here is I've just gone into the right hand view, the right plane view, and I've started drawing points along the center line that we drew earlier in the first video. If you remember, I was talking about how we need to be going over the same lines in different planes so that we can actually access them. You can see here actually I'm putting a lot of dots down, a lot of points along this line, way too much in fact. Like this is overhamming it really. You don't need to put that many, but the reason I am doing that in this case is just to demonstrate. But typically what these points represent is where there's the most, the highest density where you want to have these is where the most changes are going to be in the profile. You'll see what I mean a little bit later if you keep on watching. But for now, these are sort of guidance points for what we're going to be doing along the top and bottom and the sides of the fuselage. This will make more sense as we go along, so I'd advise just watching a little bit ahead before you start committing any of these changes to your own little project. Once again here we're just going over the points that we've already placed in the other plane and just making sure that they're available in the top plane that we're working with here, so that later we're going to be able to line up other points along the edge of the fuselage when we're outlining it. Do make sure that you're placing these points exactly on the points from the other plane, because otherwise later down the line you'll run into problems that will be hard to fix. So here what we're doing is we're going back to the right hand plane and starting to outline the shape that we've got on this image by just literally just putting these points on the outline of the aircraft. As you can see though, what I'm doing is that I'm lining these points up with the points that we put onto this center line that we were doing earlier. And that's important because when it comes to be making profiles, layers, essentially cross-sectional cuts throughout the length of the aircraft that allow us to build the whole shape. Then if the planes aren't lined up, then it just doesn't work at all. So make sure that they're lined up with the points on the center line. It doesn't matter if you miss one or two maybe, although it's preferable if you don't, obviously. But then again, considering what I've done here, I've got it's been overkill, quite frankly, and you won't need to do anywhere near as many points as I've done. So obviously in places like this where you can't actually literally see the outline of the aircraft, it is up to you to sort of judge where more or less the line is going to go. Normally it's quite easy to do, but if it's not, then it's just a case of you're going to have to work it out for yourself. So for this part, before you go rushing off doing basically exactly the same thing for what we did before, what you can do instead is essentially mirror the points in a line. So what we're doing here is we're going to be going and drawing a separate line. Unfortunately, it's going to be in a separate sketch because otherwise SolidWorks just throws a hissy fit. But anyway, just draw a central line in a different sketch in the top plane that follows the center line that we had before. And then after that, just basically go and draw all the points along one side of the aircraft. So as you can see there, I went and selected this mirror tool, and in the selection box that it gives me on the left hand side, I'm just going to go along and select all of the points that I want to mirror. And then in the second box, you'll see later, it's asking me which entity about which to mirror it, and we'll select the line that we drew along the center line that was in a separate sketch. So this next part gets a little bit tricky, and it's down to your discretion exactly how you deal with it, because there is a certain factor for just opinion here. But essentially what's going on is that we need to change the center line and create a new plane essentially to account for the fact that the center line doesn't go through the end of the tail. As you can see here, we've got a line of dots trailing off into nowhere. So we're just going to get rid of that real quick, and after that what we're going to do is we're going to draw a line in between the points that do exist within the fuselage and the tip of the end of the plane, which you can see I've got two little dots which are at the end there, and we're just going to be drawing a line from from there where I just clicked to the fuselage somewhere thereabouts. And so what we're going to be doing with this line is we're going to be anchoring our new plane on there, and in this plane we're going to be we're going to be going over the points that we previously drew in the top plane. We're going to be reiterating them in this angled plane, and from there we're going to be able to create our profiles more easily without the trouble that would have come about if we tried to do it just in the planes that we had existing in the top, bottom, the top, right and front planes. So as you can see here, I'm having a little bit of trouble placing the plane, and the reason for that is I've got not got enough parameters to help SolidWorks locate it exactly. So what I'm going to have to end up doing is creating a new perpendicular line to the one that we just drew, which will allow us to place this plane. What we have to be aware of here is SolidWorks is quite picky and will give you annoying errors and challenges. So we're looking here, we've got to put the when we're making this plane, we've got to have the two lines that are locating it in just completely separate to anything we've done before. So basically we've got to dedicate a new sketch to each of those two new lines, which is quite annoying, admittedly, and it kind of goes against what we were talking about. Cutting down on planes and sketches as much as possible, but unfortunately got to be done. So you can see while I was doing this I was having a little bit of trouble, seeing as I've only had to do this once before, but it is something you have to fiddle around with and work out for yourself just to make sure you're getting it right, and eventually you'll get there. But and if you need help, contact me, send me a message or something. I'll try and come and help you out with it. But uh, it, be aware, everyone's going to be struggling with this sort of thing, so you won't be alone. So now that we've got our plane, our slanted plane for the tail, what we're going to start doing is copying over some of the points that we made in the top plane onto this new plane, and they're basically going to be level with one another, and this is going to let us create our the basis, or well, the top view, or angled top view for the profiles when we're going to start matching them up. This is something that we wouldn't have been able to do with the top plane because the plane didn't intersect the end of the tail, whereas this new plane does, which is necessary for creating those profiles that we're going to be making later on. So naturally, before we can start doing any of that, we need to make sure that everything's still lined up with the original points that we plotted. And the way that we're doing this here is that we're just moving into a right plane first, or a right plane centered sketch, to make sure that all the lines first line up with the line that the angled plane is on. But then from there, once we've got that, we can directly copy the points over, or go over the points again in the same space, but on the new plane, on the angled plane. And then from there, we can move on to copy the outline points. Here I've just rotated the angle a little bit so that we're still within the 45 degrees of the normal of the plane here, and we're still editing just this plane. But if you go outside of 45 degrees, then obviously you're not going to be able to do anything with the points anymore, but we're just going at this angle just so we know that we're editing the right points, that we're clicking on the right points, as opposed to the ones that are on the center line. An alternate method, if you decide that you don't actually want to go through with the alternate plane method of dealing with this, is that you can create a plane that's parallel to the top plane and just have another line parallel to the center line for the tail. The only reason I haven't done this is because I actually only came up with the idea after recording the footage for this, and this is actually a point for future videos or future ideas. If anyone has any ideas on how best to tackle some of the problems presented by some of the CAD models that people are likely to do, please do let me know. Send me a message, or come find me, come talk to me in person. Anyway, what you can see me doing here is essentially just the same thing as we were doing before for the outlines. We're just outlining again in relation to the points that we've laid out in the center line for the angled plane. And I think what we're doing here in this particular one is that we're viewing it still from the top plane, so it's still we're still going to be end up creating planes that are parallel to, sorry, profiles rather, that are parallel to all of the ones in the rest of the plane.